let's let the listeners know, a little bit about yourself. I was thinking, can you kind of explain, your life and a little bit about your dad and how your dad came to get involved with the Learjet and some stuff like that?
Okay, well, my dad only had a 7th or 8th grade education, but he was an electronic genius, and he hooked up with a guy named Paul Galvin in 1928, and they formed a little company called Motorola Inc. And they, and I say they, both of them take credit for inventing the B-battery eliminator, which was a device which eliminated the static of a radio in a car. I always hear that my dad invented the car radio. He didn't. What he did was, or him and Paul, he invented the B-battery eliminator, which allowed the radio to play without the tremendous static of the spark plugs going off.
Oh, wow.
So anyway, in 1930, they decided to split up, and I don't know exactly what was the reason, but my dad formed his own company called Lear Incorporated, and did a lot of work for the, first of all, private airplane, making automatic direction finders and aircraft radio and stuff, and then during World War II, he had different divisions of his company which made many different things for the military, Calflab motors and pumps and all kinds of stuff. And Lear Incorporated became very, very successful. And unbeknownst to me, in 1952, he was the one of the primary contractors on the anti-gravity government program. And I didn't know that until just about 2 or 3 years ago.
What's that, John? Get into that a little bit. Can you explain that, the anti-gravity government program?
Well, they started after the everybody thinks Roswell was the first UFO recovery that anybody knew about. It wasn't. They had recovered several UFOs before that. In the 30s, they recovered one in England, and I believe flew it back to the U.S. under a B-17, either under or on top of, probably on top of. And they were very not knowledgeable, but they knew UFOs are around and aliens are around and everything. That's why the Roswell was so organized when it was finally determined that it was a flying saucer. They knew exactly how to cover it up, who was to go there and see it, how to put the screws to the radio stations and newspapers, and how to say that it was a weather balloon. They knew all that ahead. It had all been planned in advance, just in case one had gotten into the hands of the public. And so they were really interested in that. There's a book out written by a guy named Lou Baldwin, and it's called let's see, I think it's called In League with the UFOs, and it's a fiction story based on fact of what the scientists did with the parts of the UFO that they recovered in Roswell.
Wow.
And so then they started trying to find out how it worked and how they could duplicate it. And one of the programs they came up with, I forget the name and I'll remember it in a second, but my father was a major contractor. Lear Inc. was the major contractor in developing anti-gravity, and that was in 1952. And they perfected anti-gravity, my estimate is in 1956. And since that time, the vehicles that use anti-gravity that we have developed have got better and better and better. As a matter of fact, most of the vehicles that the public see are our stuff. The aliens aren't interested in being seen. They spend a great deal of effort being sure that they're hidden and that they stay hidden. And typically want to be seen. So anything that is seen is probably some of our stuff. We are probably very, very advanced, at least 50 years advanced technology-wise than people normally believe. We have all kinds of crafts and weapons that would defy imagination. So in 1956, my dad had decided to take, actually in 1954, he decided to take a Lockheed 18 produced by Lockheed Corporation and make it an executive transport, and it became the Lear Star. And he did some things to it, put on more powerful engines, retracted the tail wheel, made a different windshield, did a lot of things to it. And although it was a great airplane, it was unsuccessful. They only sold about 60 of them. And then in 1957, he decided to build an airplane from scratch, a jet. Or actually, it wasn't a jet. It was going to be a pusher, which is where you have the propellers pushing the airplane instead of pulling it, and they're located on the back of the wing.
Uh-huh.
And he went to his board of directors for permission to start, and they said, "No, Bill, we've not been successful with the Lear Star. We're doing very good with the military, and we don't think that we should be getting into the airplane business at this time." So my dad sold his portion of Lear Incorporated to Siegler, and it became Lear-Siegler Corporation. And he went on to form the Learjet Corporation. And the Learjet Corporation, after a short stint in Switzerland, moved to Wichita, Kansas, and he built the Learjet in Wichita, did the first flight, and built a number of them. And then in 1967, he sold Learjet Corporation to Gates Rubber, and he went on to do other things. He passed away in 1978.
Oh, wow. Pretty fascinating story, John. Him getting in on the Learjet and starting all these companies and working on the anti-gravity technology. I didn't know about that. That's actually pretty fascinating to me as well. Jeff, are you there? Are you with us now?
Yeah, I just didn't want to butt in. Can you hear me, guys?
Yeah, you're just a little scratchy. John.
How about not? Oh.
Yeah, I can hear you a little bit scratchy.
Continue. I'm sorry. Go ahead, guys.
John, that's absolutely fascinating. I was going to ask you, do you have a Learjet today?
No, I'm just a retired pilot, and just trying to pay my bills like everybody else. And I never made much money in my life because I enjoyed flying. I enjoyed being a pilot, and nobody gets rich being a pilot. But I sure had an interesting career. Never made any money except that which I made during my flying career, and so I never was able to own anything as fancy as a Learjet.
Hey, I was going to ask you too, John. Didn't you work for the CIA or fly for them at one point?
Yeah, I flew between 1967 and 1983. I did a contract work for the CIA, flying contract airplanes, contract missions.
Oh, cool. Any interesting stories you can tell us about any of that?
Well, the first 4 years I ferried airplanes from Wichita to Vietnam. There was the O-2B and O-2A Ford Air Control airplanes, which was the Cessna 337, and we flew them across the Pacific. We started in Wichita and then went to San Francisco and then to Hawaii, and then to Midway, and then to Wake, and then to Guam, then to Manila, and then in country. In country is Vietnam, not Trang, and then we'd hitch a ride down to Saigon, and then we'd go up to Hong Kong for a little R&R, and then we'd come back to Wichita and pick up another airplane.
Oh, wow.
And did that for 4 years, and let's see, then in 1977, What did I do? There was some deal there. Oh yeah, 1977 is when the Somalia became disenchanted with the Russians because the Russians were starting to support the Ethiopians, which were their lifelong enemies, and they kicked the Russians out of Somalia. And one of the things the Russians had did was built a deep water port on the in the Gulf of Aden, which is a very strategic place, and we wanted that deep water port. So when Somalia got disenchanted with Russia, we started giving them guns and ammunition, and I spent a couple of months ferrying guns and ammunition from Budapest down to Somalia, and that started the big friendship between Somalia and the U.S. And it's little talked about these days, but we actually run the port of Berbera there on the Gulf of Aden. The reason it's so strategic is because the name of the game is real estate on the Red Sea. If the Straits of Hormuz, which is the straits up there between Saudi Arabia and Iran, if that is ever blocked, the only way to get oil to the world would be down through a town in southwestern Saudi Arabia called Yanbu. And Yanbu is in the Red Sea, and the freighters would go and stock up with oil in Yanbu and then head out the Gulf of Aden. And if we didn't have the port of Berbera, there'd be no way we could protect the ships, our ships, full of oil heading out through the Gulf of Aden. So I was in on taking the initial shipment of guns and ammunition to Somalia to cement that friendship in 1977, and then in 1980, the Camp David Accords had been signed previously, about a year or two previously, between Sadat and Begin, between Israel and Egypt. And each country in the Camp David Accords agreed, among other things, to provide air transportation into the other country 4 times a week. Well, the Israelis didn't mind flying into Egypt, but you could not find an Egyptian that would fly into Israel. So the agency formed a bogus company called Air Sinai, and I was chief pilot, and we pretended to be Egyptians, and we flew those flights, 4 flights a week into Israel, into Tel Aviv. And during the times that we were off, like in the weekend, we did other jobs, subcontract work for the agency, doing special little jobs, delivering ammunition here, delivering guns there, that kind of stuff. And I did that till 1983.
Oh, wow, that sounds very interesting, almost like some spy-type, clandestine mission-type stuff. I know we interviewed a whistleblower that worked at the Evergreen Air facility in Pinal County Air Park. He was involved in installing sprayer nozzles on retrofitted aircraft. Apparently, we've uncovered, through a lot of research here at the Intel Hub, that Evergreen Air is a CIA front company, kind of what you're talking about with that other company. So it appears they have lots of stuff like that going on. Evergreen Air was even known for doing what you're talking about and kind of moving weapons around and clandestine missions.
They've always been CIA, and as a matter of fact, the Pinal County Airport is actually called Marana, and at night at 3 o'clock I was woken up by, there must have been 50 to 100 helicopters flying around. They have all kinds of underground hangars where they're hidden, and all the activity goes on at night there. But Evergreen has always been CIA and done a lot of work for them.
Oh yeah, very interesting. Yeah, the whistleblower that we spoke with that worked at that facility says how they have a black helicopter base on site. They come up from these underground hangars. They have coincidentally they have some old. The one reason we kind of knew they were CIA at first when we were probing into it is they have these old relic warbirds that are fully functional, all the weapon systems and everything. And from what I understand, civilians can't have that kind of aircraft rig set up. So that was one thing that tipped us off in the black helicopter base and the whole 9 yards. So what a very interesting facility. John, in your career, flying around and stuff, have you ever noticed anything else like that? Like we heard stories. I know this lady, her father was running low on gas or something was happening in their airplane, and they tried to call into that Marana over there at the Pinal County Air Park, and no one would answer. And they're like, oh, well, screw it, and they set down the plane on the runway. And all of a sudden they were surrounded by armed men, and the men were telling them, don't look at anything, just look forward. They helped them get fuel in their aircraft and everything and just like got them out of there. Have you heard anything like that or seen anything like that in your career?
No, but I would imagine that that's how they operate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so fascinating to me, that facility. I was thinking too, I heard you were in Egypt for a while. How was that?
That was interesting. That's when I was doing the flights, the Camp David Accord flights, and I had my family with me, and I took, we had a nice little apartment in Heliopolis, and I did a lot of flying. I did missions. We not only flew those missions for the Camp David Accords, but we flew a lot of other things.
Mm-hmm. Did you have time to go check out the pyramids while you were there or anything like that?
Oh, absolutely, and that's when they were still open. Of course, they're closed now. You can't climb in them anymore. But
we're gonna take a break real quick, John. We'll be right back. 3 minutes.
You are listening to the United Patriots Radio Network, brought to you by Network1776.org and theintelhub.com. Please tune in every night of the week, starting at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. UPRN. The Intel Hub, bringing you jam-packed, non-stop news from around the globe day and night, with reporters Alex Thomas, Virus, and Not For Sale. Please visit www.theintelhub.com. Pure Sense Filtration. Pure Sense Filtration is actively engaged in the design, assembly, and installation of water purification systems throughout the United States. Every system is individually designed to address the specific needs and desired results of each customer. Please call us at 1-515-603-6700 to find out more information about our advanced water systems, or visit www.psfiltration.com. Hey, what's up? It's me, Not For Sale, from the Intel Hub, letting you know our schedule right here on UPRN. Monday, come visit us with Jeff Weber's 2 Hours of Truth. Tuesday, visit me, Not For Sale, on the Intel Hub. Wednesday, Bill Weber's Land of Confusion. Thursday, F-Town's World War III. Friday, visit me again with the Intel Hub. Saturday, don't forget, Bones Ghost, Inch by Inch. And Sunday, the Decompression Session with Jeff Weber and Not For Sale. See you there, UPRN.
All right, we're back. You're listening to the Decompression Session with Shepard Jeff Weber and John Lear this Sunday. It's every Sunday, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Jeff, are you with us?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Yeah, hey, so we were talking a little bit about Egypt, and, I've always myself wanted to go to Egypt. Did you see anything interesting while you were there, John Lear?
There was a lot of interesting things there to roam around and go look at. Besides the pyramids, there was the souk, and just all little different things. I would have loved to have taken a trip up the Nile, but one of the things we did over there was when we were done flying as Air Sinai for the Camp David Accords, we would fly subcontract for Egypt Air, which means we became Egypt Air and we would fly flights for them. Like we had twice a week we would go up to Copenhagen and we'd go up to Athens, and another thing, there was a midnight flight that would go down to Karnak and Aswan, and down at these flights used to go all the time, during the daytime and during at the nighttime, and got to see a lot of Egypt that way. And I used to remember that as I was coming into Karnak, I would say, for those of you on the right side of the airplane, you can see the Valley of the Kings, and those of you on the left side of the airplane can see the city of Karnak, and as most of you know, Karnak the Magnificent himself appears from time to time on the Johnny Carson show. Now, you may not remember, but in Johnny Carson, when he ran from 1960 to 1985, he had a running joke where he had a turban, and he called himself the Great Karnak. And Ed McMahon would ask him questions about, what was in the envelope and stuff like that. So the people from the United States would get a huge laugh out of that. But the Egyptians didn't like that because they said, no, Karnak lived thousands of years ago. He couldn't be on TV in the United States.
That's great. So, wow, well, very interesting, man. I would love to go up to Egypt myself. Let's move on a little bit. Let's get into the moon.
Oh, by the way, one more thing is, when I was in Egypt, we used to go over to Tel Aviv for our maintenance on our airplane, and once we had a full week off, so I went back to Egypt to I'm trying to think of the name of the town. How could it slip me? Anyway, I took a bus over the Suez Canal and down to the Sinai, into the Sinai Desert, and I got to climb Mount Sinai there. They
wow.
Have a monastery there called the Monastery of St. Catherine's that's at the foot of Mount Sinai, and then there's some steps. I think there's 4,000 steps that lead to the top of the mountain, and there's a mosque and a Christian church at the very top.
Did you make it to the top?
Oh yeah. What they do is they have a road that goes around the back side of the mountain. It's quite a hike, but you can make it up to the top. Usually you try to get there just before sunrise so you can see the sunrise from the top of Sinai, and then by that time the steps are well lit and you can come down the steps, and it's usually a 1 or 2 hour descent.
Well, it would have been nice to have some eagle's wings.
Yeah.
John Lear, Jeff, we should move on a little bit to I want to get into the moon and the moon base a little bit. Very interesting about Egypt and the CIA and all that. Jeff, why don't you go ahead and get us going on the moon?
Yeah, the last time, can you guys hear me, first of all?
Yeah, you're a little low, a little scratchy.
No, you're coming in good.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, so anyway, we were talking the last time you were with UPRN, Mr. Lear, we were discussing the moon, and we kept having connection issues, or they kept shutting our phone off, or what have you. I know that happens a lot sometimes around here. I'm just curious. I've heard and done so much research on the moon, I'm just going to ask you a couple questions. You can go where you want with them. A, there's always been a big debate. Did we land on the moon? There's a lot of questions about the way the men that have been on the moon act and the way they act when they're questioned, their answers and whatnot. And the fact that the moon isn't a moon at all, it's a huge vessel, or it was towed into place eons ago. I mean, can you elaborate a little bit on some of these things? Maybe we could debunk them or even talk about them as if they're real, or aren't they real?
Yeah, that's correct. The Apollo program never went to the moon. Nobody stepped on the moon. Armstrong, Collins, and Buzz Aldrin. It was all a fake, and it was all to lift the spirits of the United States during the Vietnam War and to demonstrate our ability, our technological ability. But there's 3 or 4 main reasons why we could have never gone to the moon. Number one is the Van Allen belt, which is a radiation belt that extends from 450 miles out to about 25,000 miles out. And we could have never gone through that. Now we can send scientific send scientific equipment through it, like cameras and stuff, that are shielded, but no man could ever pass through that. So nobody went to the moon. And then the other question you had about the moon was? Oh, yeah, was it towed into orbit? Yeah, it was towed into orbit about 15,000 years ago, and the Earth is much older than people think. It's about 10 million years old. The universe is much older than people think. People think that it's 17 billion years old. As a matter of fact, it's infinite. It had no beginning, and it's going to have no end. Now, the moon is essentially a spaceship, and there are guardians, the people that live up there. There's 2 kinds of people that live up there. The ones that look like us, talk like us, but they have a lifespan that's considerably more than us. They're sociologically and technologically more advanced than us, and they work with the Greys, the little gray aliens who live underground on the moon and have laboratories there. And their basic job is to take care of us. We're known as containers. We contain a soul, and their job is to help us help that soul mature. Mature so that we can go out and play in the universe like the other adults. That Van Allen belt is there so that we can't export our kind of democracy, which is essentially wartime democracy, and to keep us from contaminating the rest of the university or the universe with our kinds of ideas. So we're left down here to mature, and some people mature faster than others. Sometimes it takes 500 lifetimes. Sometimes it takes 1,000 lifetimes. Each lifetime is called an incarnation, and you reincarnate when you die. When you pass away, you're given a quick look at your life. There is no judgment. Nobody said this is good, this is bad, but you're shown all the little nasty things you did, all the things that you think are secret, and also the good things that you did. And then if you meet the qualifications of maturity, you're allowed to reincarnate on different planets and different places and go different places. If you're not, then you reincarnate on Earth in a 3-day-old baby, and you start life all over again, learning how to live with integrity and without envy, hate, or greed. That's the whole thing, to learn how to live with integrity and without envy, hate, or greed. And once you learn that, you get to go out and have a lot of fun. Meanwhile, we're stuck here on Earth with all the things that Earth has to offer. There's a lot of good things, a lot of bad things. But
John, I've heard people such as David Wilcock.
Earth has to offer. There's a lot of good things, a lot of bad things. But
John, I've heard people such as David Wilcock talk about, possible like jump rooms to Mars, maybe possible jump room to the moon. I've also heard stories such as the Germans had some sort of jump room or Stargate technology that would take them to the moon. Do you know anything about that? Does any of that hold weight?
I've heard the stories. I don't believe them. I don't believe there are jump rooms. The aliens can travel very fast and can be and you can consider them jump rooms, but there's not jump rooms like that guy that used to work at Lawrence Livermore. He said that you'd just open a door and go inside and then open the other door and you'd be on Mars. I don't believe that. We do have a lot of good technology, but we're essentially kept on Earth. So my personal opinion is that no, we haven't gone to the moon, we haven't gone to Mars, but we do have an extensive array of offensive satellites and things that orbit the Earth.
From what I understand, go ahead, Jeff. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. We jump around here, sir, because you're just like a plethora of information. And like I told you last time, I've been studying a lot of your work and a lot of some other people's work that are right up your alley for most of my life. And I just had a question asked to me by somebody in one of our blog TV chat rooms. And it's a good question. I forgot to ask you last time. Why did we bomb the moon, or did we even bomb the moon? What the heck was that all about? And is that the big secret, the aliens you're talking about that have this base on the moon? I mean, is that one of the big reasons why they keep us from disclosure? And why did we bomb the moon? I'm dying to hear this, John, if you would.
Yeah, first of all, we never bombed the moon. We would have never have been allowed to do that. There's so much life on the moon. It's not a base. I mean, I have pictures of cities all over the place, and not only on the far side, but on the near side. So there would be no way that we could bomb the moon. And anybody that says that we did, okay, well, show me the explosion. And, of course, they couldn't do that. So, we didn't bomb the moon. We didn't do any of that. And you'll hear every once in a while that we're going to make an effort to return to the moon. That's not true. We never went to the moon in the first place. And then every once in a while you'll hear that, no, what we've decided to do is go to L1 and then go to Mars from there. And then, of course, L1 is the point between the moon and the Earth where the gravity equals out. Now, as far as the gravity on the moon, Newton's second law is wrong. And if you want to read a book, if you want to catch up on physics, if you want to be at the head of your class in gravity, then read a book called Gravitational Force of the Sun by Perry Spalter. In my opinion, she is the new Einstein. She goes thoroughly through all of Einstein's theories, shows how they were fake, shows how he was a fraud, and shows what really gravity isn't. Now, she doesn't show what gravity is, but it shows definitely there is no basis for Newton's assumption that gravitational force is due and is proportional to the quantity or density of matter. That means matter does not have any gravity in it. Mass is not attracted to mass. Therefore, all the figures that we use to figure out the gravity of the moon are BS. The 1/6 gravity that the Apollo missions were based on is pure BS. We only had 22,000 pounds of fuel on the lunar lander. We supposedly were in orbit 60 miles above when the lunar lander undocked, landed on the moon, stayed there for a couple hours, took off, came back, redocked, and did that all with 22,000 pounds. Well, it's possible that they could have done that if the gravity on the moon was 1/6, but there is no possibility that the moon's gravity is 1/6. You can also figure that out with the Bully-Eldest-Newton law of inverse square. And for that formula, you don't need to use density. Now, when they figure out the density of the moon and using Newton's law, they come up with these density figures that are they're faked. I mean, who knows if the Earth's density is 5.5 grams per centimeter cubed? Who knows if the moon's density is 3.34 grams per centimeter cubed? Excuse me. All that is just baloney. The gravity on the moon is 70%. It allows an atmosphere. People can go out and breathe on the moon. If you go to the moon you have to go through a decompression period of about a week, just as if you were climbing Mount Everest, and you have to go to base camp and then the different camps to acclimatize yourself to be able to get to the 28,000 foot top of Everest. You just can't go on the way up without acclimatizing your body. The same thing for the moon, is you can't go down on the moon and breathe their atmosphere, which is substantially less than the Earth. It's about equal to 18,000 feet on Earth is the atmosphere on the moon. And they have because of the density of the atmosphere, the daytime color of the sky is saffron yellow, and we know that because of the book that Howard Menger wrote. And he wrote From Outer Space. He went there in 1956. He was invited by the guys on the moon to go up there and take a week tour there, actually it was 2 weeks, because he went through a week of decompression, and then he went for a week on the moon, and he was taken on a train and taken all around the moon. The train stopped at with several points. They would be allowed to get out and look at the terrain. And he said it was extremely hot. They wouldn't have been able to do it for more than two or 3 minutes, but it's not as hot as we say it is. Then they were shown huge factories and all kinds of stuff. And they said the far side and some parts of the near side are almost identical to Earth. Some of them very much like the Valley of Fire near Las Vegas. Anyway, it was a very interesting time, and he wrote a very interesting book. Howard just passed away about 2 years ago, and I used to talk to him all the time, actually, by email. And I have a picture, a very famous picture taken by the Lunar Orbiter series, which is Lunar Orbiter 2-162, which shows the north face of Copernicus. It's an oblique view of what is obviously a mining area, above ground mining area. And NASA took that picture, and I show all the stuff that's in that picture, like there's buildings and bucket wheel excavators. There's all kinds of stuff in that picture, and I made a picture of it to sell at one of these UFO things. And in order to get the color of the sky right, I emailed Howard Menger, and I sent him several shades of saffron yellow, and I asked him to put an X on the one closest to the daytime color of the moon, which he did, and then I used that color for the background of this picture of the north face of Copernicus, where this mining operation is.
Wow, extremely fascinating. That also makes me wonder what people like Buzz Aldrin think, or, you know, if they were ran through some kind of mind control and memories were put into them, if they've just been told to, you know, say this and that, if they actually put them into another room that looked like the moon and they're like, okay, you're on the moon now. It makes me wonder what went down with that. Any ideas, John?
Well, the one quote that I like to use is when they were in the 3 weeks of contamination, and they kept showing the pictures of Buzz and Neil jumping around. At one point, Neil looked at Buzz and says, "Look, Buzz, we missed the whole thing."
There's footage around there floating around where there's other people on the moon when they were up there too. I noticed that. There's some footage floating around where Neil and Buzz were on the moon or something, and it was showing them. And there's someone else in the background kind of pops in for a minute, like they messed up.
It's been 40 years, and it was a good hoax. It was extremely well done, and just little parts are starting to leak out. And NASA is still trying to say, yeah, we did it. There's no doubt we did it. There's always the footprints. Well, of course, that's all BS. They never went to the moon. None of the astronauts ever to the moon. One of the interesting things is that the Apollo mission members never, ever had a reunion. Now, don't you think of those 12 guys, or 24 if you want to count the guys that were up in the orbiters, did something so momentous that they would get together? I mean, look, Doolittle, all he did was fly from a aircraft carrier to bomb Japan, and they meet every year and turn the cups upside down of the guys who have passed away. But what do the guys do who flew to the moon? They never had a reunion.
That's weird. That's really weird. I was thinking too, and Jeff, you can throw in, John, I interviewed David Icke a while back, and he talks about what he calls the moon matrix. A lot of what you're telling us, he talks about as well, and has came to the same understanding. A lot of the stuff you're telling us about the moon. He has this theory where he talks about how the moon is hollow, and it's some sort of transmitter for a mind control program that it's kind of hard to explain, but basically they're broadcasting signals from the moon that kind of keep us controlled and limited in a certain way. Have you heard anything like that?
No, I don't personally believe that, but I don't think it could be true. I mean, it's certainly, they certainly would have the capability to do that. Their job is to take care of the containers which contain the soul. Now, they have nothing to do with the soul. Somebody on a higher level takes care of the soul. All the Greys are supposed to do are to see that we don't die when before we're supposed to, or that we die when we're not supposed to. And they take care of us. They pick us up every once in a while. At the beginning of life, they pick us up once at 3 years old, once at 7 years old, and once at 13 years old. And it's a normal checkup, like a lube and oil. You take your car in and get the oil checked and fan belt checked and see that there's water in the batteries, that kind of stuff. And that's what they're doing. After they pick up at 13 years old, then they only pick you up as needed. Like if they need to put in some kind of an upgrade or there's something they need to change, they'll do it.
Wow.
Hey, John, if you don't mind me asking, you say these so-called aliens that are watching us from the moon and taking care of the vessels, and I'm one of those people. I got your back on that. I can visualize that. I don't know why I can, but I can. I can visualize it. And my question is, with this horrible, horrible doom and gloom situation with the Gulf and what it's starting to look like and what professionals are saying behind the scenes, some are which actually are dumping info right to the Intel Hub and UPRN. You think we're going to get some help from the powers above to help with this?
First of all, nothing bad's going to happen. There is no Wormwood or Planet X or Planet Nibiru or anything like that, and nothing is going to happen in 2012. Nothing's going to happen in 2017. All that stuff is put out to keep the human race in a continual feeling of anxiety and worry, and start to worry about death and the things that are come. It's all baloney. In 2012, it'll be a year just like every other year. There'll be a few wars here, a few wars there. There'll be shortage of food here. There'll be a hurricane there. But all the other stuff that you hear is just sheer baloney. It's just an attempt by those who are running things, and I don't know who those guys are that are running things, to problems, and to keep us in a state of anxiety. So don't worry about any of that. It's all baloney.
Yeah,
I mean, that's not baloney, unless it is, but that's one hell of a way to go about serving up baloney. I don't mind saying. I mean, the Gulf, I mean, listen, man, if you read the stuff that we got on this, and I'm probably sure you probably know a whole lot more about it than we do, but it is bad. I mean, it's the worst I've ever seen in my lifetime doing the research I do.
What's the worst?
The Gulf oil spill situation and the chemicals that they're pouring down there.
We did that. You know, we have, let me tell you something. The Navy has 24 offensive weapons orbiting offensive weapons platforms circling the Earth at all times, along with 2 Navy command platforms. And they do all kinds of stuff. And I keep a list. As a matter of fact, I should call it up, but I don't know on my computer where to call it up. They've done all this stuff. They did the Mura building. They did the World Trade Center. They did the tsunami in Southeast Asia. They did the fires in Australia. They did the BP. As a matter of fact, just go and type National Geographic BP oil fire and look at that blue beam that's coming down. That's the thing that they use to light that thing. Now, what their plan is, why they want to create all those problems, I don't know. And everybody says it's the end of the world. Well, no, it's not. Something else will happen that'll make that not so bad. And I don't know what that is, but that's definitely those guys up there, our guys, us. Whoever runs the United States, and I don't know, I have my suspicions, but that's them playing around with their equipment up there.
Oh, that wouldn't surprise me the least. So from what I understand too, John, we were talking about the moon and these people on the moon that kind of watch out for their containers down here. I've heard things such as, us as a human race aren't even allowed in certain areas of space or on other planets. Is that true to your knowledge? Is there some kind of space commission or something that says, well, we're not evolved enough right now to even charter beyond this region because, it could be detrimental to something, to other races or something. Have you heard anything like that?
Yeah, that's true. That's every other planet and every other moon in our solar system, and that includes Jupiter, Neptune, Saturn, the moon, Venus, all those moons and satellites that orbit those are inhabited by people very similar to us, sometimes identical to us, sometimes a little bit different, sometimes a little bit taller, sometimes a little bit wider, sometimes even more different than that. But it's all populated. But we're not allowed to go there because this is kind of a nursery. This is where we're supposed to stay until we learn how to get along with everybody else. And that's what we're here for, is for our souls to mature. And until we mature, we ain't going anywhere.
So for, a little bit of hope for people, these guys might be using some of their space-based weapons, some of our, underground military, our military-industrial complex. They might have carried things out like 9/11 and possibly this Gulf oil disaster with their space-based weapons platforms. But theoretically, some of this stuff might be countered from time to time. I've even heard that on a few occasions, nuclear devices have been countered or rendered inoperable by ETs. Do you think
that's correct?
Do you think they kind
that's
of
correct.
they
that's
might
correct.
Kind of
that did
have
happen. They have stopped some nuclear attempts to set off a war, and that doesn't mean there aren't going to be any, but they have been able to stop them up until now. And as far as the World Trade Center, there's not a shadow of a doubt that they did that with a weapon called molecular dissolution. And what they do is they destroy something by making it go down to its primary elements in the form of dust. And all that dust that was around Manhattan and the south part of Manhattan where the buildings was all covered with dust that was about 80 microns, maximum of 80 microns in diameter. And that's what happens is when one of these weapons hits steel or concrete, it dissolves into that kind of dust. And that's what they did. Now, here's the interesting thing about it is either that was the first time they used it at that power, or they were not aware of the power of what they did. But the reason there has never been a new World Trade Center is because the effect is still going on. It's non-self-quenching, which means that they may have turned the button off that fires it, but they didn't turn off the result, so that as soon as they put up a sealed structure, it starts to disintegrate. And that's why there's been no World Trade Center built. And what's it been, 9-10 years now? And they keep coming up with the excuses that, they haven't got the plan finalized, or they can't get together with the unions, and they can't do this, they can't do that. But the real reason is because the effect of molecular dissolution is non-self-quenching, and every time they go to put up something, it disintegrates.
That's interesting. And Jeff might remember this too, but last time you were on with us, John Lear, I believe we interviewed Nancy Talbot before you were on air with us. And, she's this crop circle, she analyzes crop circles scientifically. And this is weird because after talking to you the last time, after listening to this Nancy Talbot talk about these crop circles and reading some of the reports on 9/11, see if you can understand what I'm getting at, John. There is reports that nanothermite was found in the dust of the World Trade Center. Well, I've also spoken with Richard Gage from Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. Now, I was asking him about the properties of nanothermite, and I talked with him a little bit about what could be used to ignite it. And I asked him if energy could be used to ignite it or some kind of directed beam, and he said that was possible. And Nancy Talbot what went through my mind with some of these crop circles is, could some of them even be those weapons platforms playing tricks on people, possibly testing them on low powers and stuff? I don't know. Maybe they're authentic, maybe they're created by who knows what. But what she was saying is, in the soil, there's these little tiny iron spheres that form where metal was molten due to how the crop circles were formed and the energies that are used in them. What's interesting is in the 9/11 dust, they found similar iron spheres. And I'm sitting there putting two and two together, and I'm thinking, okay, so maybe they use like nanothermite in conjunction with this, because they found this nanothermite in there. It's like a fact, but it doesn't seem like all those explosions could trigger perfectly and this thing could go down. And I was thinking, your theory is they hit it with this, basically a directed energy weapon from above. Maybe that hit that nanothermite to trigger everything kind of at the same time, so it could just be almost like a free fall collapse. They did find those little iron spheres in that dust as well, kind of like those crop circles, and I was just kind of putting two and two together. What do you think about that?
My opinion is that nanothermite is a bunch of bullshit. It was never used in the World Trade Center, and if other people want to believe that, that's okay. As far as the crop circles, I think they're made by the aliens. I think they're some kind of message, but I don't know what it is. And I thought, like you at once, that it was the military who run these weapons, who power them down and make kind of really neat, interesting figures. But it could go either way. It could be the aliens, or it could be the people upstairs with these 24 types of different weapons during the crop circles.
Oh yeah,
but the you can forget about nanothermite because it just isn't true.
Do you think they threw that out there as a diversion, like almost like so you wouldn't get into the level of conversation that we're into now, talking about these space-based weapons? They kind of had to give you a little bit of a teaser or something. Why do you think
you're absolutely correct, and that's why it came 8 years later. Right.
Absolutely. Very, very interesting, John Lear. When we get back, I'm sure Jeff has some good questions for you. We're going to take a break right now. We'll be back in about 3 minutes. You're listening to UPRN with John Lear, the decompression session. Lear. I'm your host, Shepard, and we're also joined by your other host, Jeff Weber. Extremely interesting conversation we're having with John Lear. This is awesome. John, a recap a little bit on these space-based weapons platforms. I've heard of one they got called Rods from God, where apparently they drop these 20-foot tungsten rods down at 36,000 miles per hour, and they guide them somehow, and they hit with the kinetic force of a nuclear weapon. Do you know about those, and what other platforms?
No, I've read about them. I've read about them, but I don't know about that. And no, I don't know of any other weapons they have other than the molecular dissolution ones.
Man, we got to send you these documents we came across and see what you make of them. But we've got some documents where it talks about the patents for holographic generation, those ones you were telling us about last time that come complete with sound and visuals.
Sound, heat, movement, and everything else. I mean, they can project it right into thin air.
No, that's interesting. I was going to ask you, because I've studied so much about 9/11, and the reason I think your theory holds a lot of weight is, not to mention there's patents on such items, holographic projection, but there's news footage. There's newscasters that day saying, this looks like some bad animation. There's basically animation on news broadcasts that show missing wings on the plane. And I was thinking, John, do you think these holograms were used in conjunction with like a cruise missile, perhaps, or something like that? The reason I say that is because I could see how, like, if they had a cruise missile flying and they had some kind of like tracking device in that missile, basically they could use that in conjunction with that command center that was flying around the E-4B that day. They could probably somehow overlay graphics onto CNN feeds that would follow that cruise missile. Do you see what I'm getting at, and what's your opinion on that?
Yeah. My opinion is that no, they did not do that. It was a holographic image that made the airplanes simulate crashing into the building, and it was the weapons from space that finished it off. The cruise missile, the drones, the stuff, all that stuff, just too risky. They had the space-based stuff nailed down to what they were going to do, and there's no reason to take a chance on a cruise missile or a drone getting out of control or screwing the things up. It had to come off just exactly the way they did. So now, like with the Pentagon, that was strictly bombs. I don't think they had anything from space down there because there wasn't that much damage done. And
right.
April Gallup, who was an intelligence officer, was sitting 40 feet away from that hole. And when it went off, she grabbed her 6-month-old son, who was in his car seat right below her desk, put him over her shoulder, and crawled out that same hole to go onto the grass at the Pentagon to get triage. Now, she says there was no plane, no drone, there was nothing. She said there was no smell of fuel, no kerosene, no JP7, no JP5, nothing, no gasoline, no smell of anything. It was just an explosion.
What's your thoughts on and Jeff, you can throw in on this too, what's your thoughts on, I've heard, and it's hard to dig all this up, but I've gone pretty far. At one point I found a document, I don't have it anymore, where the American Airlines released a statement saying that those flights weren't even on the manifest that day. How do you, do you think those flights were on manifest and had legitimate passengers, and do you think the flights might have landed somewhere else? Do you think they actually blew any of those planes out of the sky? Do you think the planes were not even, do you think maybe they didn't even take off with them? They didn't even exist ever? All, like those calls are suspicious to me. they supposedly called in from 30,000 feet, which is pretty much impossible, and they sounded kind of scripted, in my opinion. And then you got this guy that they said the hero, and he said let's roll, and he's this and that. None of that kind of added up to me. What's your opinions on the plane?
Exactly. Neither of the American Airlines flights existed. There's no record of them taking off, no record of them departing, no tapes of them taking off. They're not on the Bureau of Transportation certificate or Bureau of Transportation records. They didn't exist. They weren't there. So it was all a hoax.
Yep, that's what I think too, because I could not find any records of them as well. And if you realize, you never hear anything about the families of the people on the plane. And when anyone says anything about it, people try to change the subject real quick. Oh, what about the families in the towers? You never hear anything about the people on the plane. So it all sounds fairly scripted.
I think the most damning incident entire deal was that the Shanksville crash. There was no plane. There were no bodies. There was nothing. As a matter of fact, the coroner said his job was over like 10 minutes after he got there because there wasn't one body part, not one speck of blood, not one piece of ripped clothing, nothing that you would find at a massive air crash such as the one that supposedly took part in Shanksville.
You're absolutely right. There was nothing there. Nothing happened there. I've been a pilot for 40 years, been involved in accident investigation. I know what wreckage looks like, and there's no possibility an airplane could bury itself like that. None. Absolutely none. Zero.
Well, and if you guys remember, didn't they get back then, I mean, I know now we deal with billions and trillions now in the numbers, but back then, didn't the American Airlines get some kind of bailout for $30 million or something like that? I think after 9/11 they claimed that their air business was so bad that they needed their $35 million bailout or something like that. And I'm just wondering if that was some kind of payoff to just kind of keep everything hush hush, because obviously American Airlines knew that those planes did not exist that day.
Well, that's possible. I know that TWA 800, they got a bailout to shut up about the Navy missile that hit TWA 800 off New York. And what happened was that as it was climbing, there was a test going on using a drone, and a submarine had fired this inert missile. There were no explosives on it, and for 1 or 2 milliseconds it lost contact with the drone, and when it reestablished contact, it reestablished contact with that 747, and that's why that got shot down. And it was really important to cover that up because, of course, that would have been the 5th civilian airplane that our U.S. Navy has shot down. And there were so many people that knew what was going on. First of all, Boeing knew for a fact it couldn't have been a center tank fuel tank blowing up, and they were starting to make noises. And so the government says, well, look, we want you to say that it was a 747 and that the fuel tank blew up. And Boeing said, absolutely not. We will not do that. It cannot happen. And they said, well, look, how about this? How about you say it was just the center fuel tank of 100 series, which was not used anymore, and we'll let you merge with McDonnell Douglas. And, of course, Boeing had been trying to merge with McDonnell Douglas for almost 10 years, but they were tied up in the litigation of the too many companies in one company, and antitrust litigation. And so Boeing took it in return for saying that the center tank ignited the fuel of the fuel pump of the center tank ignited the fuel only on 100 series Boeing 747s. They were allowed to merge with McDonnell Douglas. Now TWA, for their part, and of course they knew it was a missile too, they were given $360 million to help bail them out, but even that didn't help TWA. They went under for other reasons. But yeah, the money the government does pass out big money like that to keep people shut up, as they did. Now, many people, and I would say 75% of the people on the 9/11 crashes did not exist. No social security numbers, no driver's license numbers, no home address, no work address, no workplace, nothing like that. So they didn't exist. But the people that did exist, their families were given a healthy sum of money to keep their mouths shut and not say anything, period. Not talk to any news crew or anything, just keep their mouths shut. And that's how they kept that quiet.
Wow, very interesting. I talked to a pilot who flew for Southwest Airlines. I don't know if that was his whole career or what, but I was talking to him about chemtrails, and this guy just didn't believe that chemtrails were real, and his excuse was, there's some model jet engine that just blows a bunch of smoke and it's condensation and blah, blah, blah. But he said his friend actually was in a plane right behind that Flight 800 and saw it got blown out of the sky by a missile. He witnessed it.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, the chemtrails, what they are is they're dropping a substance which creates a layer between the Earth and the ionosphere, and anything between that layer is invisible. And they can activate that layer through HARP, and anything that's flying, like a set of bombers or whatever it is, if they're between the layer that's being created by the chemtrails and the ionosphere, they disappear. They can't be seen by the naked eye or by radar.
It's like cloaking technology. You know what,
yeah.
John, I believe I've actually witnessed that with my own eyes. It's like I saw this object and it was almost just like blurred in there, like they were doing something like that. We also interviewed A.C. Griffith, one of the few people who's made it inside a chemtrail program and back out. And he was explaining to me, there's obviously many uses for the chemtrails, and like you were saying, in conjunction with HARP and whatnot. Also, what he was telling me from making it in and out of the chemtrail program, he was NSA and CIA. He said that the Russians were the ones that first perfected this technology, but the scalar technology they used in conjunction with the barium and aluminum in the chemtrails, and they can get a three-dimensional view of the battlefield and know everything that's on it. So there's all these like weird spin-off operations of the chemtrails, and I originally thought they were used for depopulation, but that looks to me now like it's just a side effect. I mean, it's obviously not good for you to breathe all that stuff in, but they like you said, they got the cloaking technology. They can map three-dimensional images of terrain and battlefields and people on it. Weather manipulation, weather modification, that's been openly admitted now. So very interesting. When you were flying, John, I don't know what the last time you've flown was, but did you ever see or notice chemtrails?
No, I quit flying I retired about 10 years ago, and I never saw any.
And it was
I don't even know whether they were around then or not.
Yeah, it was just like you saw like contrails and stuff, right?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Were the chemtrails around? Were the chemtrails around 10 years ago?
They were, but it wasn't as rampant, and it was only in certain areas and this and that. And I'm just wondering, John, like, what do you think these pilots like are thinking? Like, I mean, do they just think it's normal now? Like, if you went up in a plane right now and you were up there, I mean, do you think you would definitely notice that? I mean, it's pretty evident from the ground down here. I mean, what do you think they're being told, and why don't they notice it?
I'm sure they'd notice it, but they wouldn't say one single word, because the name of the game is to keep your job. And if you start talking about UFOs or chemtrails, you're going to be asked to leave.
And that's always been like that in the pilot business, hasn't it, John? I mean, isn't it kind of like, you would never talk about a UFO, or it could be your ass, or what?
Yeah. Like when I was American Trans Air, I was there for 6 years. I was a check airman. I was their only North Atlantic check airman, and and a guy from Houston called up and wanted an interview, and I said, "I'll give you an interview on one condition is that you don't mention my name because it will cost me my job." And he said, no, you have my promise. And the headlines the next morning were, American Trans Air Captain believes in UFOs. And boy, I'll tell you, it didn't take them more than 3 days to get rid of me. I was called to Indianapolis. I was stripped of my ID and security clearance and said goodbye, and the whole thing didn't last more than 20 minutes.
Wow. So that shows you right there. I mean, for the people listening, that that's what's involved. I've heard of weathermen talking about chemtrails and losing their job and then being blackballed from any news station or any weather agency. They just would not be hired again talking about chemtrails.
I'd like to change the subject real quick. I got a swift message from a gentleman here who doesn't want his name released, but he is Air Force. And his question for John was, I'll just read it to you. It's about the Stargate program on TV. At the end of the program, in the credits it says, thanks to the cooperation of U.S. Space Command and Department of Defense. I'll just read it to you. It's about the Stargate program on TV. At the end of the program, in the credits it says, thanks to the cooperation of U.S. Space Command and Department of Defense. And can you comment about a Stargate that's been either disassembled or deactivated in the state of Michigan?
I don't know anything about it. I don't believe in Stargates. I believe that Space Command runs a lot of programs, and it's a very secret organization. It's got a lot of people in it, and when you go into Space Command, when you sign up for it, one of the things you're told is to say goodbye to all your friends, because you will never, ever talk to anybody that you know now again, ever again. And the reason they do that is so that you don't end up in a bar one night accidentally meeting an old friend and say, hey, man, you're never going to guess what I saw today, Mm-hmm. And so they make it sure that you never have the chance to ever run into a friend. And Stargate, no, I don't believe in it. And that doesn't mean it's not true. It's just that I don't believe it.
John, underground bases to me are extremely fascinating. I mean, I remember I would just stay up for hours on end researching all these underground bases and all the stuff involved in them. I mean, it's to the point to where I want to go make a documentary on them, but I don't know where to start because I don't think I'd make it too far without getting arrested. First of all, can you elaborate on, I know you know the original story of the Dulce base, the Dulce facility. Can you kind of explain that a little bit? Explain who Mr. X is, and some of these drawings pertaining to the Dulce base, and do you think they were doing genetic manipulation at this facility?
Yeah, of course they were. And the way I got involved to it is when I first got involved in UFOs in 1985, 86, I believe it was 1987, I went to a get-together of the top UFO people in the United States, and I think there was 11 or 12 of us. And there was Linda Howe and Tom Adams and, I can't remember the names. And anyway, somebody had donated several condominiums up in Colorado. I'm trying to think of the place that we went to, but we stayed around there for about 5 days, and we discussed where ufology was, what we could do about it, what anybody knew about it, and just exchange information. Well, at one point, Tom Adams came up to me. He said, John, I live in Texas, and I just got this note, and I don't have time to research it. Since you live in Las Vegas, would you mind checking it out? And I said, sure. And he gave me the note, and it was from Mr. X, who said that he lived in Vegas and that he had a friend who was a guard at Dulce, and it had escaped with 7 minutes of video, 25 black and white photographs, and about 100 pages of documents. And then Mr. X went on and described what Dulce was like, and hallways that went on forever, and da-da-da-da. So anyway, when I got back to Vegas, I got together with Mr. X, and he told what he knew about his friend, and that his friend had escaped and was now trying to avoid being caught. And Dulce has these people that are called, let's see, what do they call people who go after escaped people?
Oh, like marshals or something? Like
No, what's the name they call them?
Like bail enforcement?
Yeah. What do they call those guys?
Bail bondsmen or something? Bounty hunters.
No.
Bounty hunters.
There's bounty hunters. They have bounty hunters specifically for Dulce, and they're really badasses, and they were after him. And so what the guard did is he made 6 copies of everything, put them in 6 different boxes, sealed them very carefully, waterproof, everything proof, and gave one to each very close friend of his and said, if you don't hear from me, I'll check with you every 4 months. If you don't hear from me in an 8-month period, you can do whatever you want with the box. And in the box was a copy of the 8-minute video of Dulce, the 25 black and white photos, and the 100 pages of documents. And so Mr. X showed me where he hid the box here in Vegas. It was down by Dolan Springs. We didn't go to the exact place, but we went pretty near it and showed where he had buried it. So anyway, many or several years went on, like 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 or 8 years, and the security guard failed to make contact for 8 months, and so we were allowed to go look for the box, and when we went to look for the box, couldn't find it. And there were several people that, I mean, they put their heart into this. I mean, they spent a year camping up there and searching, and that box was not able to be found, and none of the other 6 people, none of the other 5 people could find their boxes either. So I don't know what the story is on that, but obviously the guard, actually, they killed him, and either that or he escaped forever somewhere. But anyway, that's the Dulce story, and those 7 or 8 minutes of video were of a hallway, security camera, the tape that comes out of that, and then the 25 black and white photos of where some of the labs and stuff. And what happened was Mr. X was allowed to see the 25 photos, and he made a pen drawing of 5 or 6 of them. And he asked me if I would distribute them under my name, and I said, yeah. And so it was in a number 4 pencil, something. It was really, you could hardly see it. So I recopied them with a little transfer machine and a felt tip pen. And I think there were 6 or 7 drawings, and those became known as the famous Dulce papers. Those were mine. I drew those. And also I copied the information from one of the sheets of paper on IBM Executive typewriter, and I distributed that package to a bunch of my friends. And that's been, 25 years ago. And now they surface every once in a while called the Mystery Dulce papers. Where did they come from? Well, I was the guy that made them, and I made them from the original. Mr. X had drawn them from the original photos. A lot of people go out looking for Dulce. They'll never find it. It's very well hidden. The security guard, the security stuff there is better than Groom Lake. You will never, ever get anywhere close to it, so, don't even bother.
Hey, John, this is just how my brain works, but, these underground bases fascinate me. I came to realize that an awful lot of these underground bases are on Indian reservations. Now, one other coincidence I realized is that on Indian reservations you've got casinos. Casinos that also a lot of times pay the tribe. do you think the casinos are set up for possible entry points into underground bases so that no one could detect workers going in and out because casinos are so heavily fortified and secured? You could go in as a repairman and just pop into some room, and next thing you know, you're in an underground base and no one would even know. And B, what do the Indian reservations, how do they correlate with these bases, or do they?
I don't think they do, and it's possible they use them for an entrance, but there are many entrances. I doubt if they use the casinos for them, but every Indian tribe, like the Hickory tribe, there gets a titanium American Express card every year. They can put on it whatever they want. Every year they get brand new trucks, brand new cars, brand new everything. And they're never asked about it. They're never questioned about where the money goes or what it's used for. And that's so that they'll keep their mouths shut about what they see or what happens at Dulce.
Wow. Jeff, are you still there?
Yes, sir.
What, you got any questions on these underground bases?
I've done a lot of research on that too, and everything about that fascinates the hell out of me. I mean, the immensity of it, the technology behind it, the cost of underground bases, and honestly, guys, I don't think we'll ever know the entire ball of wax on that subject. But I would just about give anything to get a tour of something like that, or hell, even get a walk through NORAD. It really fascinates me, and I'm an aircraft nut, too. I've gone to a lot of aircraft museums, but, I mean, my close second would be deep underground military bases. I would love to get my hands or my eyes around something like that. That's something I'm never going to experience. That and flying in a military aircraft, because I'm just too damn big.
Hey, speaking of aircraft, that just reminded me, John Lear, Evergreen Air, that company that I was talking about, that's a CIA front company, they got the contract to spray the deadly chemical. It's a known neurotoxin. It's linked back to the Rothschild family, to some companies that they own. They got the contract to spray that neurotoxin all over the Gulf on the oil spill.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I'm sitting there thinking, okay, CIA involvement. They're already a known chemtrail spraying company, and they're the ones that got the contract to spray the deadly chemical core exit onto the Gulf oil spill.
Huh. That's interesting. Yeah, they gotta love the different contracts like that. Speaking about underground bases, there's 200,000 miles of underground roads that go around the United States, and that's how they deliver stuff. And this started in 1960 when they had a conference in Los Angeles, and the conference was about building roads underground, and the fact that people were just too aware of stuff being transported on public highways, so they were going to have to go underground. So they not only made underground railroads, but underground roads, underground this, underground that, and there's about 200,000 miles of it. And a couple of the new underground bases, one is in the middle of the Nevada test site between the Tonopah Test Range and Groom Lake. It's called Sandia. And I watched it being built, because at that time, when they started building it in 1980, what they did is they took off half of a mountain, the top of half of a mountain, and then built the base, and then put the mountain back on, so it looks like it was always there. And their problem was that transportation, and they had 7 Boeing 737s that fly between McCarran and Groom Lake, Tonopah, and different other places. One is in Idaho, taking personnel to work. And at Sandia, there's about 2,000 people that work there. So they had to transport these people without people becoming suspicious about, hey, look, they just added 10 more 737s, or, hey, look at all those buses being loaded up with those people, or the increased traffic between Las Vegas and Mercury. So what they did is they built an underground train, which was part of the underground railway system in the United States. States. And that train goes from Sandia to Las Vegas, and it stops at several of the major, three of the major hotels. So it's a fantastic way of hiding personnel going to work, because a guy just walks into a hotel who could be a gambler or anything, and all he does is put his handprint, his eye print, his eye scan, and he gets in his door, and then there's a elevator. He presses the button, and they go down and get on the train, and they're at work in 20 minutes. It's one of these real high-speed maglev trains.
Well, and that almost correlates with my theory of how they use the casinos for entrances. Do you think those are in casino hotels in Vegas?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, the entrances are in the casinos.
Oh,
That's
wow.
why they can just go to guest parking and park. They don't have to account for anybody. They don't have to show any idea. They
Yeah.
you know, they just can pretend they're gamblers.
That's
they just
perfect.
walk in there and they go into a room that nobody knows is there and go to work.
That's a perfect setup right there.
It's a perfect setup, and there's three hotels, and then the end terminus pickup place is right directly below the new terminal for the special.
That's a perfect setup right there.
It's a perfect setup, and there's three hotels, and then the end terminus pickup place is right directly below the new terminal for the special projects at McCarran Field. You know, they had that old building for years and years and years, and last year they finished the new one, the new special projects building. It's really fancy, and one of the train ends, the terminus is under that building.
Well, and that, you know, I was driving through the desert out there somewhere. I think it was like past Indian Springs or I can't remember exactly where it was. And I saw some naval facility, and that reminds me too. I was talking to a executive officer of a nuclear submarine. This guy was on subs back during the Tiananmen Square era, when they had that event in Tiananmen Square, and you know, this guy was like one of the smartest people I've ever had talked to. He was into nuclear physics and all sorts of stuff like that. Extremely, you know, he knew what he was talking about. You could definitely tell he was involved in the military and all sorts of stuff. And I had been researching these underground bases and tunnels for a while, and I brought up with him, I said, because I knew that there's this place I heard about in Idaho, in one of the lakes over there, where they build nuclear submarines. And I'm thinking,
Sandpoint.
Yeah, I'm thinking you don't just transfer these things on a flatbed truck once they're built and drop them in the ocean. So there's a known tunnel under there. Well, I was talking to this executive officer, and I just stated it like it was absolute fact. I was like, so what's up with that tunnel that goes from the Puget Sound into that lake in Idaho for the subs? And this dude's jaw just like straight out dropped, and he basically acknowledged it, but he didn't tell me anything about it. Have you heard about that?
Yeah, it's not a tunnel. It's the Pacific Ocean underlies the United States, and what they do is in the middle of Nevada, there's a place called Hawthorne. And when you drive into town, there's a little sign there that says Naval Undersea Warfare Center. And there's a little lake there that's 15 miles long and about 100 feet deep. And for 30 years, I wondered, now, how in the hell could this be an underground training or sea training center when it's only 100 feet deep? Well, it turns out that the Pacific Ocean is 4,300 feet down, and what they did is they built an elevator that all you do is drive into the base, drive onto the elevator, go down 4,300 feet, and you're at a huge nuclear subbase. And the reason they built it there is because just across the street in Hawthorne from this training center is the U.S. Army depot that builds all the high-tech, sophisticated missiles and weapons that go on these submarines. And all they have to do, there's a little train there, and it just goes right across the public highway there. And all they have to do is drive across that highway and into the building, load it onto the elevator, and run it down to the subs. And then the subs, all they do is load it up and then exit through the Pacific Ocean. The one big exit they use mostly is north of Monterey, is in Monterey Bay, just north of Fort Ord. And it's about 100 feet under, and all they do is cruise down in there, and it's 212 miles to Hawthorne, Nevada, to the huge underground base in Hawthorne, Nevada. Now, there's several of those places all around the United States. St. Louis is one, but they use the Mississippi River to run the subs up there, as they do to Memphis. And the place you're talking about in Idaho is Sandpoint, and they do the same thing at Sandpoint. And Lake Tahoe is one. They're all over the place. There's also a facility at China Lake, which is, way out in the desert and a naval testing place. And every once in a while, I'll run into a guy who has seen a big nuclear submarine there. So all they had to do was, sail the Pacific Ocean and find a part that goes up, and then just surface up to the level of the dry lake. Are you there? Hello?
Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Do you think that those subs can travel up and down the Mississippi River as well? Do you think
absolutely, absolutely, positively? And the reason I know is because I have a friend who lives in that St. Louis area, and he knows the Mississippi very well. And one of the things he has always wondered as a little boy is they continually have a dredging machines or dredging boats going up and down the Mississippi. And he says most of the barges that go up and down the Mississippi draw only about 2 or 3 feet. So he said, why should they have to dredge that thing? But if they're running a 60-foot submarine up there, that would make sense why they're dredging it. And that's how we found out that that's why they're dredging the Mississippi 24/7, is so the subs can go up and back and forth to St. Louis.
Wow, that's interesting. Really interesting. We're going to get ready to take a break here for about 3 minutes, and then we'll be back on the other side. You're listening to the Decompression Session with John Lear, myself, Shepard, and Jeff Weber. We'll be back shortly. UPRN.
You are listening to the United Patriots Radio Network, brought to you by Network1776.org and theintelhub.com. Please tune in every night of the week, starting at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. UPRN. The Intel Hub, bringing you jam-packed, non-stop news from around the globe day and night, with reporters Alex Thomas, Virus, and Not For Sale. Please visit www.theintelhub.com. Pure Sense Filtration. Pure Sense Filtration is actively engaged in the design, assembly, and installation of water purification systems throughout the United States. Every system is individually designed to address the specific needs and desired results of each customer. Please call us at 1-515-603-6700 to find out more information about our advanced water systems, or visit www.psfiltration.com. Hey, what's up? It's me, Not For Sale, from the Intel Hub, letting you know our schedule right here on UPRN. Monday, come visit us with Jeff Weber's 2 Hours of Truth. Tuesday, visit me, not for sale, on the Intel Hub. Wednesday, Bill Weber's Land of Confusion. Thursday, F-Town's World War III. Friday, visit me again with the Intel Hub. Saturday, don't forget, Bones Ghost Inch by Inch. And Sunday, the Decompression Session with Jeff Weber and Not for Sale. See you there. UPRN.
We're back right here on the decompression session. Jeff, no matter how much time you have with John Lear, it never seems like enough. It's almost like you need to have a 24-hour John Lear marathon, when you have him on the air. Just so much information, so fascinating. What do you think?
I bet you Mr. Lear hears that almost all the time.
His head's swelling up right now. Now,
I'll tell you what. I want to tell you what made my head swell up is the other day, a guy wanted to interview Perry Spalter, and Perry Spalter is really the New Age Einstein. I mean, she just takes Einstein and trashes him and tells us what's really going on. And she's the one that came up with the statement, there is no basis for Newton's assumption that gravitational force is due and is proportional to the quantity or density of matter. And anyway, she wanted, this guy, Sheldon Day, wanted to interview her on the radio, and she emailed him back, and I just wanted to read you a little bit of the email that she said. She said, I appreciate your invitation for a radio interview. I do not think I would be a good guest. I do not hear too good. It would be better if you interview John Lear. He has read my books and all my papers. He has asked me many challenging and smart questions in our correspondences. He has a special gift to popularize difficult scientific material and present it in an interesting way. If you pass through Los Angeles, you may want to come to our house for a face-to-face interview. Now that swelled my head. I couldn't get out the door for about 3 days.
John, it smells funny just to tell all my friends that don't even know who the hell you are when I talk to I talk to John Lear, man. They're like, who the hell's that? Nobody knows who John Lear is. But I mean, in my circle, man, you are, I could just talk to you all day long. I could pick your brain all day. 2 hours isn't enough. We should do a John Lear marathon. Showtime, CBS came here and interviewed me in December, and it was a 6-hour interview, and they told me they were doing a UFO special in July. And so I sat here and talked to him for about 6 hours, and then day before yesterday in the mail, I got a postcard, and it said, "Thank you for your participation in the Penn and Teller bullshit news show. It will be airing July 15th." So the whole thing was a setup. It was to interview me, and then they would take that tape and kind of have fun with it. That kind of mocked me on that stuff. Funny. I've read a lot of things. I've reviewed a lot of photos and video in my time, and I'm a young man in the game. But it just keeps occurring to me that you're always going to have people that debunk. And listen, there's a lot of stuff that I came across 10 years ago that I believed to be wholehearted, and I ended up, proving to myself that it was. And then, guys, this is how this game works. When you hear this kind of stuff on UPRN, whether it be guests like John Lear, or when F-Town comes out and gives you Middle East reports, or anything that we give you here, I mean, we've had a lot of people give us a bunch of crap about doom and gloom lately. We're just giving you the news, guys. This is our opinions. We're giving the news to you. We're opinionated on it. And we invite you to not believe what you hear from John Lear. Don't believe what you hear from Shep or I or anybody else that's on this network. Do the research for yourself and come to your own conclusions. At the bare minimum, it's entertaining, if that's what it takes to get off the couch.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. John, I was talking to my parents the other day, and I'm like, what are you guys doing? And they're like, oh, we're listening to a John Lear interview. And I'm like, oh, really? You're listening to an interview we did of him last time he was on the show? No, we're listening to a Project Camelot interview of him. So, I thought that was great. So they're new John Lear fans over here, my parents. But man, so much stuff to go through. You know, I was going back over and I saw that there's this naval destroyer you were talking about. It's a DDG 1000. Can you explain that?
The new it's a Century 20. Are you talking about the Century 21?
Yeah.
Yeah, the new naval destroyer. It's about 600 feet long. And the only difference between it and any other destroyer, it's totally computerized. There isn't one single person on it. And what they do is they built a fantail. On the fantail, they built a huge helicopter pad so that whenever they need to go, they take 9 technicians. And these technicians know everything there is to know about every single computer on that boat. And they can go and fix anything. And they were doing the sea trials there about 2 years ago down at and carries a crew of 9 and 12 SEALs. And it does about 120, 130 knots. And
wow.
What's interesting about it is the way they do that is they have the material that's made out in space in one of our manufacturing facilities that's in orbit. And this stuff has a special quality that when you apply electricity to it, it keeps the fluid or the sea about 3 to 4 centimeters away from the hull. So there is no limit. You know, the limit to a hull speed is let's see, what is it? 1.34 over the square root of the water line, and usually that's about 45 knots for anything that the Navy has. But these things really haul ass because they're not limited to that because they have no part of the hull that's touching the sea. They're just eliminating. They're just practically.
It's frictionless, basically.
Frictionless.
And so apparently that would be quiet too. It'd probably be pretty silent. It's not even touching the water. Wow.
Yeah, they're fission reactors, and of course we're told in the newspapers and all this stuff that we're working very hard to make fission practical, and it's been practical for 20 years, and we've got the size down so that we can put them in these fast attack subs, which are 70 feet long, and can use this power to do just about anything. So we can send these things anywhere, do anything they want. They have a SEAL team hull release where they can get in this little thing, and then they equalize the pressure to the depth they're at, and then climb out and do their work, and then come back in, repressurize, and get back in the hull and haul ass back to wherever they want to go. I'm sure they were.
Go ahead.
I'm sure they were involved in that Somali thing, but I don't know how.
Did you hear about those unmanned subs that came up missing out of Chesapeake Bay? They happened to do with ordnance demolition disposal. And I'm wondering where these unmanned vehicles are right now. 4 of them came up missing about 3 weeks ago. I just found that kind of weird considering the Gulf oil spill is going on. That executive officer I was telling you about, John, we were getting into some over unity motor talk and some perpetual generation talk, and I was like, so what are some of these subs powered with? And he said there's something called, I believe he said H3O or helium-3 technology. Have you heard anything about helium-3 or H3O?
No, well, that's what fission reactors work on, is helium-3.
Oh, okay. And that, from what I understand, that's mined in space or on the moon, maybe?
That's what?
It's made or
people
mined.
People say it's mined on the moon, but I have trouble with that because helium-3 cannot accumulate with an atmosphere. It has to be a body in space that does not have an atmosphere. So they get it from some other place else. And I just read a article that some company, and you would know the name, I just happen to forget it, was supplying 1,500 pounds a month to the U.S. government in 1963 of helium-3.
Wow.
And that's a lot.
Wow. So they've had this around for a while, and
a long time.
And have been utilizing it. Any technology coming out of Russia that you're aware of? I was checking into quite a bit of Russian UFOology and like that Tunguska blast and all sorts of stuff. And I came across this Russian KGB or FSB agent who said, several years back they got some kind of signature. The way I pictured it is much like that Alien versus Predator movie where they got some sort of satellite heat signature. And they were getting this reading coming from Tunguska, Russia, the original ground zero of that Tunguska blast that's so suspicious that happened back in like 1913 or something like that. That it knocked down trees for hundreds of miles around the area. Apparently, this guy, and he sounds legitimate. I'm usually a pretty good character of or person of judging people's character and stuff. This guy sounds really legitimate. I was just wondering if you've heard anything of the contrary or anything. But supposedly they detected some heat plume or something. They sent a team into the area. It's somewhere like in Siberia, I believe. So it's like hard to get to. They get to this area, and it's some kind. They determined it was some kind of alien facility, some kind of underground base. It had strange hieroglyphic writing on it, and what they make of it now, what they know of it now, is it's some kind of planetary stabilization device that activated itself. They were saying it says on it, they've kind of translated some of the things it says. It says something like, what preserves us preserves you as well, almost like there's another planetary body that it preserves as well. And it activated itself about 5 or 6 years back. Have you heard anything about that? And
No.
Do you know of any other Russian technology that's of interest?
No, but the Russians have always been far ahead of us. As you know, the Cold War was a hoax. There was no such thing as a Cold War. We've always been allies with the Russians. We've always cooperated with them. They actually run the ISS, International Space Station. And the Tunguska thing, I'm trying to remember what I was told about it. Somebody had to be eliminated. And the good guys eliminated. Now, I don't remember whether they eliminated a saucer or a facility in the ground. But it was good guys getting rid of bad guys. And,
wow.
That was what the Tunguska was all about.
And that could have quite well had to do with that facility in the ground, so that's pretty interesting. I really want to dig into that a little more. John Lear, our time's coming kind of short. I was going to see if I could twist your arm sometime to maybe do a post on the Intel Hub or something for us over here, something interesting of your choice. Maybe if you're interested in that. And also on your way out, plug anything you want to plug, let people know where to find any of your work. And it's been a pleasure having you on the decompression session.
Okay, well, thanks. Take a look at my stuff on thelivingmoon.com. That's THELivingMoon.com. That's thelivingmoon.com. And just remember that try and live your life with integrity and without envy, hate, or greed, and you will get a reward beyond what you can ever possibly imagine.
Absolutely. Jeff, anything in closing?
John, I just want to thank you for coming out to UPRN and open invitation, my brother. Anytime you want to come out here and spill the beans or just kick the proverbial can around the block with Shep and I, you're more than welcome here at UPRN anytime. And
okay, thanks.
We're going to keep getting it going, guys. We're going to keep bringing you the news and these great guests. I hope you enjoyed the show this evening, and I'd like to invite everybody to stick out here at Blog TV for 30 minutes of overdrive after we shut down the show.